The champagne flute in my hand was just for show. I never drink before 3 p.m., and even then, it's a measured pour of single malt. Never bubbles. The flute was a prop, part of the costume for today's performance. Audrey Mitchell, supportive wife, at her nephew's baptismal luncheon at the Pierre, across the crowded hotel ballroom. My husband David was the star of his own. Sadder show. His sister, Jessica, had him cornered near the ice sculpture, a dubious-looking dove at her hand permanently glued to his forearm. I watched, calculating, as she lifted a fresh tumbler of amber liquid from a passing waiter's tray and pressed it into David's hand. To the world's best brother, Jessica's voice, a melodic trill that set my teeth on edge, carried just far enough. And to my sweet Lucas, blessed to have such a generous uncle, David, already glowing with that particular pink hue of a man 3 drinks past his limit, beamed. He was always handsome, that all tousled blonde hair and boyish grin, a walking J. Crew catalog. It was the first thing that drew me to him. Sometimes, I think it was the only thing. He raised the glass. To family. I took a sip of my untouched champagne. It was flat for the past 40 minutes. Jessica's campaign had been a masterclass in manipulation. I'd caught the highlights from my strategic position near the Shrimp Tower. David, you're an inspiration, Wall Street legend, and you've stayed so humble. She'd gushed earlier, her laughter a little too loud. Oh, stop. David had demurred, puffing his chest out just slightly in his Brioni suit. My Brioni suit, a birthday gift from 2 years ago. No, I mean it. Look at this room. Look at this life you've built. Lucas looks up to you so much already. I tell him, see your Uncle David? That's what success looks like. Harvard, Wall Street, the whole package. I just want him to have the opportunities you had. David had melted like butter. Jess, anything for the little guy. Anything. And now, with the critical mass of relatives and friends sufficiently lubricated by open bars and salmon roulade, Jessica was moving in for the kill. Her husband, Mark, a perpetually perplexed-looking man, hovered in the background, bouncing a fussy Lucas. He caught my eye for a second, looked instantly guilty, and turned away. Jessica clinked her glass with a spoon. The genteel ting-ting-ting sliced through the murmur of conversation. Everyone, if I could have your attention for just a moment. The room quieted, turning expectantly towards the sound. David stood a little straighter, a goofy, proud smile on his face. My stomach tightened. This was it, as you all know. Jessica began, one hand on her heart, the other still vice-gripping David's arm. Today, we celebrated the blessing of our beautiful son, Lucas, but the real blessing is family. She dabbed at a non-existent tear. And in this family, we are so incredibly lucky to have my brother, David, a man whose success is only matched by the size of his heart, a smattering of sentimental os and supportive applause. David's mother, Eleanor, was dabbing real tears across the room. David has always been my rock, Jessica continued, her voice quivering with practiced emotion. And today, in his incredible generosity, he's shown just what that means. David, honey, tell them. Tell everyone what you promised your godson. David, flushed with pride and Glenfiddich, looked out at the crowd. He was in his element at the center of attention. The beneficent king. He cleared his throat. Well, he began, swaying almost imperceptibly. It's simple, really. Family is everything. And for my nephew, my godson, Lucas, he paused for dramatic effect, a move he'd seen in bad movies. I want to ensure his future is as bright as it can be. So, I'm announcing today that I will be personally assuming responsibility for Lucas's entire education fund. From his first day at Trinity Preschool all the way through Harvard Law. If that's what he chooses, every tuition, every book, every step of the way, it's on me. The room erupted. There were gasps, cheers, Applause. Jessica squealed and threw her arms around David's neck. Oh, David, thank you. Thank you. Eleanor was sobbing openly now. My boy. My generous, wonderful boy. A cold, sharp clarity cut through the noise in my head, slicing through the warm fog of secondhand embarrassment. I did the math instantly. Trinity's preschool program, roughly 45,000 a year, 12 years of private school at, say, Dalton, averaging 55,000 per, 4 years of an Ivy League undergraduate program, another 80,000 per year, 3 years of Harvard Law at 70,000 plus, miscellaneous costs, tutors, summers abroad. I stopped at a conservative running total of over $1.7 million. Not a promise, a multi-million-dollar liability, announced by a man whose personal checking account, which I funded, held $4.326.18 as of this morning. The prop in my hand was now a hindrance. I set the champagne flute carefully on a passing tray. The sound of my Jimmy Choo heels on the parquet floor was a steady, metronomic click that cut a path through the crowd. Conversations died as I passed. The applause faltered, then trickled into an uncertain silence. I stopped before David and Jessica. David's triumphant smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. Audrey? Sweetheart, did you hear? I heard, I said, my voice level, clean, carrying in the quiet room. David, we need to discuss this. Privately. Now. The confusion on his face curdled into something uglier, petulant embarrassment. Discuss what? It's a celebration. It's for family. It's a financial commitment you're not authorized to make unilaterally. I stated, keeping my eyes locked on his. We will discuss it. Now, a beat of stunned silence. Then Jessica's laugh, high and brittle as shattered glass. Oh, for God's sake, Audrey, can't you let him have this moment? This is between my brother and me. It's family business. She spat the word family like a weapon. I slowly turned my head to look at her. Her eyes were bright with malice and triumph. She'd gotten what she wanted, and now she got to watch me, the childless career woman, the outsider, try to take it away. She was reveling in it. The money that would fund this gesture is marital business. Jessica, I said, my tone icy calm, and as such, it requires the consent of both parties in the marriage. My consent, which was not sought and is not given. Her smile didn't waver. She looked past me, playing to the audience of our relatives. See, this is what I live with. David works his tail off, provides this incredible life, and she has to control every penny. She can't stand him being generous. She can't stand him being the man he is. David, buoyed by the residual alcohol and the perceived support of the room, puffed up. Audrey, not now. We'll talk about it at home. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene? I asked, a whisper of incredulity finally breaking through my control. You just pledged nearly $2 million of money you don't have without consulting me. And I'm making a scene? Jessica took a step forward, her face now just inches from mine. I could smell her cloying perfume and the Pinot Grigio on her breath. You miserable, controlling bitch. She hissed. The words meant only for me. You've always looked down on us. On me. Well, this isn't your money. It's his. He earns it. He decides. And it is none of your goddamn business. Then, in one swift, shocking motion, she grabbed the half-full ice water glass from the nearby table. The ice cubes clinked. Before I could react, before anyone could move, she flung the contents directly into my face. The shock was physical, a slap of cold that stole my breath. Iced water soaked my hair, my blouse, dripped from my chin onto the silk of my Victoria Beckham top. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Time seemed to stop, crystallized in that moment of cold, public humiliation. I didn't gasp. I didn't shriek. I closed my eyes for 1 second, 2, feeling the water trace cold paths down my neck. I heard David strangled. Jessica. Jesus. I heard his mother's cry. I heard the deafening, judgmental silence of everyone else. When I opened my eyes, my vision was clear. The cold had burned away the last remnants of any desire to be polite, to keep the peace, to be the bigger person for the sake of a man who would never be big enough to protect me. My gaze fell to the table beside us. There, next to the ravaged remains of a chocolate baptism cake, was a bottle of red wine, a 1996 Chateau Margaux I'd had the hotel bring up from my own reserved locker. It was 3/4 full, a deep, blood ruby red. My movement was not a furious lunge. It was deliberate, precise. I picked up the bottle by its neck. It was heavy, solid. Jessica's triumphant smirk was still etched on her face, mingled now with a flicker of uncertainty. What are you going to do, Audrey? Call your lawyer? I didn't answer her. I looked at David, whose face was a mask of stunned horror. I held his gaze for a fraction of a second, long enough for him to see the absolute nullity where his wife's patience used to be. Then I turned back to Jessica. I appended the bottle. The wine didn't splash, it poured. A rich, continuous cascade of crimson that hit the ivory bodice of her ridiculously expensive Zach Posen dress and exploded across it like a wound. It soaked the delicate lace, darkened the silk, dripped in rivulets down the tulle skirt. She stood frozen, mouth agape, looking down at the ruin, a strangled gurgle escaping her throat. The silence in the room was now absolute, profound. I set the empty bottle back on the table with a soft, definitive clink. I reached for the linen napkin next to it, wiped my fingers carefully, though they were clean. I dabbed the moisture from my chin. My voice, when it came, didn't sound like my own. It was calm, flat, and carried to every corner of the still ballroom, since we're making public announcements. I began. I have two. I looked at David. 1. Every financial commitment you have just made in this room is hereby null and void. It is revoked. It does not exist. Not a single cent will be moving from any account bearing your name, or my name, for Lucas's education, or for any other purpose related to your sister, without my explicit, written authorization, which will not be forthcoming. A low murmur started. Jessica found her voice. A shriek. You can't do that. He promised. Everyone heard him. I continued as if she hadn't spoken, my eyes still on my husband. 2. Effective immediately. All of your personal lines of credit, all of your cards, and all discretionary access to our joint accounts are frozen. You will have access to a basic checking account with a monthly allowance, the details of which my attorney will provide. You will not be able to buy a cup of coffee without my knowing about it. Consider it a financial timeout. David's face had gone from pink to ashen. Audrey, you're overreacting. We're a team. We were. I corrected him quietly. A team communicates. A team doesn't get drunk and sign its partner up for a lifetime of debt to appease a manipulative sibling. You dissolved the team. David, I'm just handling the paperwork. I turned to leave. My soaked blouse was cold against my skin. My hair was a mess. I had never felt more powerful. Jessica finally broke from her stupor, lunging forward, her wine-soaked dress leaving a smear on the floor. You vindictive cunt. You ruin everything. This is my brother's money. His. You'll hear from our lawyer. I paused, half-turned. Jessica, I said, and the sheer ice in my tone made her flinch. The retainer for my law firm is more than your husband makes in a year. By all means, have your lawyer call mine. It will be the most expensive phone call you never actually get to make. My final glance took in the room. David's shattered expression. Jessica's tear-streaked, wine-splattered fury. The rings of shocked, avid faces of aunts, uncles, family friends. I saw Mark holding Lucas, looking at the floor. I saw Eleanor, hands over her mouth, crying in earnest now. Without another word, I walked out. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. The click of my heels was the only sound. In the gilded quiet of the hotel lobby, I retrieved my Birkin bag from the coat check. My hands were steady. I pulled out my phone. There was a single notification on the screen from my private banking app. I'd triggered the sequence of commands the moment Jessica's hand had moved toward the water glass. The message read, in stark, simple text, primary joint account, discretionary access user, David Mitchell, suspended. All secondary credit lines frozen. Instructions confirmed. Awaiting further auth. I slipped the phone into my bag, straightened my spine, and pushed through the heavy brass doors of the pier, out into the crisp, indifferent New York air. The performance was over. The real work was about to begin. The cold air of Fifth Avenue was a shock, but a clean one. It stripped away the cloying hotel heat, the smell of salmon and spilled wine, and the thick residue of collective judgment. I didn't hail a cab. I walked, the damp silk of my blouse chilling against my skin with every step. The steady click-clack off my heels a militant counter-rhythm to the frantic beating of my own heart. It wasn't panic. It was the high-octane thrill of a gambler who has just shoved all her chips into the center of the table. No more bluffing. My phone buzzed in my Birkin, a persistent, angry hum. David. I silenced it without looking. It buzzed again, and again. Then came the texts. Rapid-fire pings I could feel through the leather. David. Audrey, where are you? David. You have gone too far. David. Jessica is hysterical. Her dress is ruined. David. Mom is crying. This is a disaster. David. Call me now. We need to talk. I stopped at a crosswalk, my thumb hovering over the screen. The light from the phone illuminated my face. I typed a single sentence. My movements precise. Audrey, the conversation you should have had with me was before you pledged $1.7 million. We'll talk when you're sober and alone. I hit send, turned the phone to do not disturb, and dropped it back into the abyss of my bag. The walk to our building on Central Park West was 20 blocks. I needed every one of them. By the time the doorman, Carlos, swept the glass and brass door open for me, his usual genial smile faltered. He took in my damp hair, the stained blouse. Mrs. Mitchell, is everything all right? A small accident with a water glass. Carlos, nothing to worry about. My voice was smooth, untroubled. If Mr. Mitchell arrives, please inform him I am not to be disturbed under any circumstances by anyone. Carlos's eyes widened a fraction. He'd been with the building for 15 years. He'd seen it all. Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. The private elevator ride to the penthouse was a silent ascent into sanctuary. The doors opened directly into our foyer, and the cool, quiet expanse of our home enveloped me. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a postcard view of the park, now shrouded in the deep blues of early evening. Everything was sleek, minimalist, perfect, a $12 million monument to my success. David had picked out the art at a few safe, colorful abstracts, but the architecture, the view, the mortgage, all mine, a premarital asset, a fact Jessica, in her blissful ignorance, had never once questioned. I went straight to the master bath, peeling off the ruined silk blouse and dropping it into the hamper. I caught my reflection in the mirror. My makeup was smudged, mascara leaving faint, sooty trails. I looked interesting, not shattered, not defeated, awake. The shower was a baptism of a different kind, scalding hot water, then biting cold. I scrubbed the feeling of Jessica's ice water and the sticky sweetness of the baptismal cake from my skin. As the water beat down, the adrenaline began to recede, replaced by a cold, clarifying fury. I had been here before, not the exact scene, but the feeling, the slow, simmering resentment of being the bank, the problem solver, the adult in a room full of emotional and financial children, all while being treated as the interloper, the outsider with the checkbook, wrapped in a thick fret robe. I padded into my study. This room was my command center. No cozy armchairs here, just a vast, fossilized limestone desk, 2 monitors, a Bloomberg terminal discreetly off to the side, and a wall of books that were actually read. I powered up my laptop, the glow illuminating the darkening room. First, I confirmed the financial lockdown. My private banker, Jeffrey, had already emailed. Subject: Instructions executed. Audrey, as per your telephonic authorization. Discretionary spending on joint account 4479 Mitchell. D. Suspended. All credit cards, Amex Platinum, Visa Black, etc. Frozen. New debit card for basic account, monthly limit, $5.000 to be couriered to you tomorrow. Standing order to monitor for any attempted lines of credit. Do call if you need anything further. Best. G. $5.000 a month. For a man who thought nothing of dropping $3,000 on a dinner to impress a client, or $2,000 on a bespoke shirt from Turnbull Asser, it would feel like a straitjacket. Good. Next. I opened a secure folder on my desktop, labeled Family. Inside were PDFs, scanned receipts, spreadsheets, a decade's worth of financial interactions with David's family. I clicked open a file dated 3 months prior, an email chain from Jessica Harrington, Jessica Glamgirl at yahoo.com, to David Mitchell, David.Mitchell at chelseagallery.com. Hey, big brother. So, we found the perfect summer rental in the Hamptons. It's in Bridgehampton, walking distance to the beach. 6 beds, heated pool, total dream. The catch is they want the whole summer paid up front. A steal at $120,000. Mark's bonus is stuck in processing. Corporate is the worst, and we're a little tight. Any chance you could float us the loan? Just for the season. We'll pay you back in September. Swear on Lucas's life. Love you. Hugs and kisses, Jess. From David Mitchell, David.Mitchell at chelseagallery.com, to Audrey Mitchell, Audrey.Mitchell at goldmansachs.com. Sweetheart, see below from Jess. Things are tight for them. It's just a loan for the summer. Can we help? It's for family. I remembered the cold pit in my stomach when I'd read that. Not at the amount. $120,000 was significant, but not debilitating. It was the casual assumption. The loan that would never be repaid. The tight that was a permanent state for Jessica and Mark, who lived a lifestyle 50% beyond his mid-level marketing salary, funded by guilt trips and David's desire to play the hero. My reply had been diplomatic. Firm. From Audrey Mitchell, Audrey.Mitchell at goldmansachs.com, to David Mitchell, David.Mitchell at chelseagallery.com. David, with the current market volatility and our own portfolio rebalancing, committing that level of liquidity for a non-essential, non-income generating asset is not prudent. We need to keep powder dry. I'm sorry, but the answer is no. Perhaps they could look for something more modest? Let's discuss tonight. The discussion that night had been David, sulking on the Italian leather sofa. She's my sister, Audrey. It's just for the summer. You know Mark's job is unstable, and that's exactly why we don't give them 6 figures for a vacation home. I'd said, not looking up from my charbal, if they need help with rent on their actual apartment, that's a different conversation, a budgeted one, not a Hamptons share. You don't understand family loyalty, he'd muttered, a line Jessica had undoubtedly fed him. I understand enabling. I'd shot back, finally meeting his eyes. I understand that every time we bail them out, we teach them that responsibility is optional. I will not fund their fantasy. He'd given in. Of course, he always did when I held the line. He'd sent Jessica some placating email about market concerns and joint financial planning. making it sound like a mutual, regrettable decision. But I'd seen her at the next family gathering, at a 4th of July barbecue at their cramped Jersey house. She'd been saccharine sweet to my face, then spent the entire afternoon loudly regaling anyone who would listen about the darling little cottage in Montauk they'd snagged last minute. A transparent lie. She'd made a point of ignoring me, of praising David for the amazing bottle of wine he'd brought, of creating a clear us versus her dynamic. David had basked in the positive attention from his family, completely blind to the warfare being waged. The front door to the apartment slammed open with such force it shook the walls of my study. Audrey, David's voice, slurry with rage and residual alcohol, echoed through the vast living space. I didn't move. I saved the file and closed my laptop. He appeared in the doorway of the study, a storm of disheveled handsomeness. His tie was gone, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his hair a mess. His face was flushed, his eyes bloodshot. What the hell was that? He roared, advancing into the room. What did you do? I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. I believe the question is, what did you do, David? You made a unilateral financial commitment of approximately $1.7 million. I rescinded it. Then your sister assaulted me with a glass of ice water. I responded in kind. The sequence seems clear to me. Assaulted? It was water. You threw a bottle of $200 wine on her. The cost of the wine is irrelevant. The principle is not. She threw the first everything. A lifetime of snide remarks, of passive aggression, of trying to siphon money from you. Today, she graduated to throwing actual beverages and making you promise actual fortunes. I drew a line. You humiliated me. He shouted, slamming his hand on the limestone desk. The sound was sharp, final, in front of my entire family. My mother is devastated. Jessica is a wreck. Do you have any idea what you've done? A cold, calm detachment settled over me. This was the core of it, not the money, not the principle, his humiliation. Let's talk about what I've done, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I've paid the mortgage on this apartment for 8 years, a mortgage that is in my name only, on a property I owned before I met you. I've paid for your cars, your watches, your vacations, your client entertainment that never seems to bring in any clients. I funded your half of the gallery investment that you quietly walked away from when it got difficult. I have, for a decade, subsidized a life for you that you could not begin to afford on your $58,000 a year salary. He flinched as if struck. We never said the number out loud. It was our unspoken rule. I was breaking all the rules tonight. So when you stood up in front of 100 people and promised your sister a future funded by my labor, Mirisk, my intelligence, yes. David, I drew a line, and I will humiliate anyone who tries to cross it. He stared at me, his chest heaving. The anger was morphing into something else that a wounded, petulant defiance. It's our money. We're married. What's mine is yours, right? That's what you said. And what's mine is mine. I replied icily. As per the prenuptial agreement you were so eager to sign because you thought it proved you weren't a gold digger. It does. It also very clearly states that all premarital assets, and the growth thereon, remain separate. This apartment, separate. My investment portfolio, separate. My income, arguable. But the agreement strongly favors separation. The only ours is the pittance we've jointly contributed to a checking account for groceries. The account you can no longer access. The color drained from his face. The reality was beginning to seep through the alcoholic haze. You froze my cards. I did. You can't do that. I already have. Check your phone. Try to buy a pack of gum. He fumbled for his phone. His fingers clumsy. He opened an app, tapped. His face went slack with disbelief. Declined, he whispered. He tried another. Declined. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a new kind of fear. Audrey, you're treating me like a child. No, I corrected. I'm treating you like an irresponsible spendthrift who just tried to give away 7 figures of marital assets without consultation. Fiduciary rules demand a freeze. Consider me the regulator. She's my sister. He yelled, the fear giving way to fresh anger. My flesh and blood. You wouldn't understand. You're an orphan. You don't know what it means to have a family that needs you, that looks up to you. The room went utterly silent. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of a siren on Central Park West. Tea all faded into a hollow roar in my ears. He had said it, the unthinkable, unforgivable thing that had always lurked beneath the surface of every argument with his family, the secret weapon he'd never dared to deploy. Until now. I stood up slowly. The robe felt like armor. I walked around the desk until I was standing directly in front of him. He was taller than me, but in that moment, he seemed to shrink. Get out, I said. My voice was a whisper, but it carried in the silent room like a gunshot. What? Get out of my apartment. Now, Audrey. Wait, I didn't mean. You meant every word. I cut him off. It's the core of it, isn't it? The orphan, the lonely, wealthy, witch with no family who should be grateful you and you're wonderful, loving, needy family, let her tag along. As long as she pays the cover charge. I took a step closer. You think I don't know what family is. Family doesn't weaponize love. Family doesn't see a tragedy to losing both parents by 20-2 as a character flaw or a leverage point. What I had with my parents, for the short time I had them, was more family than you and your pack of emotional vampires will ever know. Tears, hot and shocking, brimmed in his eyes. I'm sorry. I'm drunk. I'm upset. You're honest. I said, for the first time in years. You're honest. Now get out. Go to your family. See how far their love gets you without my credit card to fund the sentiment. He didn't move. He just stood there, shattered, looking at me as if seeing me for the first time, seeing the steel and the cost of bending it. I turned my back on him, walked to the intercom by the door, and pressed the button for the front desk. Carlos. Yes. Mrs. Mitchell? Mr. Mitchell will be leaving for the evening. Please ensure he has a taxi waiting. He may be disoriented. A pause. Of course. Mrs. Mitchell. I released the button and looked at David one last time. The doorman will help you find a hotel. I'd suggest something modest. Your new allowance hasn't started yet. He stumbled out of the study, a broken figure. I heard the soft thud of the front door closing. The silence that followed was profound, and it was mine. I walked back to my desk, my hands perfectly steady. I picked up my private mobile, the one with only a dozen numbers in it. I scrolled to one labeled Feldman. Charles, attorney, and pressed call. It rang twice. Audrey. His gravelly voice answered. A little late for social calls. Everything all right? Charles Feldman had handled my parents' estate. He'd drawn up my prenup. He knew where all the bodies were buried because he'd helped me bury some of them. No, Charles, it's not. I need you to pull the Mitchell prenup, and I need you to draft a formal notice of separation. We'll need to discuss a post-nuptial agreement with very specific asset and spending controls as a condition of any reconciliation. But prepare for the alternative. A long sigh on the other end. Not surprise. Resignation. David finally do something stupid enough? Spectacularly so. In a room full of witnesses. His sister threw a drink in my face. I may have escalated. I could almost hear his grim smile. I'll have the separation notice for you by 10 a.m. The post-nup will take longer. He'll need his own counsel. Of course. Not that he can afford anyone decent. What are the terms you're thinking? I looked out at the dark expanse of the park, the pinpricks of light in the buildings beyond. Total financial transparency, a legally binding, monthly reviewed budget, 0 direct financial transfers to any member of his family without my express, notarized consent, an infidelity clause that works both ways. and a clause stating that any further public or private commitments of marital assets without my consent constitutes immediate and irreconcilable breach, triggering the most punitive terms of the prenup in my favor. Charles whistled softly. You're not messing around. He'll never sign it. Then he's choosing his family of origin over the family he created with me, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. And that will tell me everything I need to know. I ended the call. The city glittered, cold and beautiful and indifferent. For the first time in a long time, I felt aligned with it. I was no longer Audrey Mitchell, the long-suffering wife bankrolling a man-child and his drama-hungry clan. I was Audrey Mitchell, principal, and the audit had begun. The alarm on David's phone was a merciless, blaring siren. He fumbled for it on the unfamiliar nightstand, knocking over an empty mini bottle of Johnny Walker Black. His head throbbed, a sick, punishing rhythm that pulsed behind his eyes. For a dislocated moment, he expected the soft, high-thread count embrace of his own sheets, the faint smell of Audrey's jasmine perfume on her pillow, the hum of the dual-zone climate control. Instead, his fingers found cheap, starched polyester. The light seeping through the gaps in the blackout curtains was the sickly yellow of a Manhattan mid-morning, filtered through a dirty window. He cracked an eye open. The room was a study in beige despair. Generic landscape art bolted to the wall. A low, persistent drone from the HVAC unit. The lingering smell of stale cigarette, smoke, and industrial cleaner. The Hudson Hotel, not the worst place in the city, but a far cry from the pier, and a universe away from Central Park West. Memory returned in a nauseating flood. The baptism, the cheers, Jessica's proud face, then Audrey, standing, cutting through the noise with that calm, surgical voice, the ice water, the arc of red wine, her words, each one a nail, null and void, frozen, financial timeout, Jesus. He groaned, sitting up, the room tilted. He reached for his wallet, a Pavlovian gesture. Coffee. He needed coffee, Advil, and a shower. In that order, he pulled out the Black American Express card, the Centurion, his badge, his proof. The cool metal felt reassuring in his hand. He ordered a large coffee and a breakfast sandwich from room service. His voice gravelly. Put it on the room. Room 1408. Of course. Sir, it'll be 20 minutes. He stumbled into the shower, the water pressure weak and temperamental, alternating between scalding and lukewarm. He dressed in yesterday's shirt and suit pants, the fabric wrinkled and smelling faintly of spilled whiskey and shame. A bellhop arrived with the food. David scrawled a tip on the bill and handed over the Amex. The young man ran it. Frowning, he tried again. I'm sorry, sir, it's not going through. Do you have another form of payment? A cold trickle, distinct from the hangover, traced David's spine. That's impossible. Try it again. Another swipe. Another shake of the head. Declined. I can try the chip. Never mind. David snapped, snatching the card back. His heart was hammering. A glitch. A system errored. He pulled out his Visa Black card. Declined. His MasterCard. Declined. Flushing. He shoved cash at the bellhop, to most of the meager amount he'd had in his pocket from the day before. Keep the change, he muttered, shutting the door on the man's politely confused face. He leaned against the door, breathing heavily. Okay. She froze the cards. She said she would. It's just a shock tactic. She'll calm down. His phone, charging on the nightstand, lit up. Not Audrey. Jessica. He ignored the call. It rang again, and again. On the fourth ring, he snarled and grabbed it. What? Jessica? Her voice was a shrill, tear-soaked shriek, bypassing his eardrum and drilling directly into the center of his headache. She's insane. She's a monster. My dress is ruined. Do you know what a Zac Posen original costs? It's not even about the money. It's the principle, the violence. David pinched the bridge of his nose. Jess, I can't do this right now. You can't do this. I can do this. I had to walk out of the pier looking like I'd been in a knife fight. Everyone saw. Mom is devastated. She thinks it's her fault for raising a son who can't control his wife. She's not a dog. Jessica. She doesn't need to be controlled. David said, the words tasting like ash. This was the party line. The thing he was supposed to say. The thing Audrey had trained him to say. Well, she certainly needs to be leashed. Jessica shot back. And you need to fix this. You need to get your balls out of her purse. Go home and tell her that promise stands. You promised Lucas, David, in front of God and everyone. You can't take that back. I didn't take it back. She did. Because you Lethier. Jessica's voice dropped to a venomous hiss. I knew it. I knew she had you by the short ones. All that power couple talk. She's emasculated you. You're her pet. A handsome little pet she dresses up and takes to parties. And the second you try to do something for your own flesh and blood, she punishes you. And you take it. Each word was a tiny, precise stab. They found the secret fears he drowned in scotch and ignored. It's not like that, he said, but it was weak, unconvincing. It's exactly like that. I tried to warn Mom and Dad. They said I was being dramatic. Well, who's being dramatic now? Your wife is holding the whole family hostage over money. Your money. It's more complicated than that, David mumbled, sinking onto the edge of the bed. No, it's not. It's simple. You made a vow to your nephew. Your witch of a wife threw a tantrum and humiliated us all. Now you man up and make it right. Or are you going to let that bitch steal your family from you? Don't call her that, David said, but there was no force behind it. I'll call her what she is. Now fix it. I'm going to Saks today to see if they can save the dress. Put it on your card. Consider it a down payment on your nephew's future. Since you've clearly decided to renege. The line went dead. David sat there, the phone buzzing in his hand. He felt 5 years old, shamed, scolded, and utterly powerless. He needed to talk to Audrey. He needed to make her see reason. This was his family, his reputation, his life. He took a cab to Central Park West, the fare cleaning out the last of his cash. The doorman, Carlos, was at his post. His usual friendly nod was absent, replaced by a carefully neutral expression. Mr. Mitchell. Carlos. I need to go up. Carlos didn't move to call the elevator. I'm sorry. Sir. Mrs. Mitchell's instructions were explicit. You are not to be admitted. David stared at him. Carlos. It's me, David. I live here. I have my instructions. Sir. From the owner of the apartment. The emphasis was subtle, but brutal. I can call you a cab if you'd like. Humiliation, hot and fresh, washed over him. He'd tipped this man at Christmas, given him bottles of wine, and now he was being treated like a delivery boy who'd gotten the wrong address. Just ring her. Please, tell her I'm here. Carlos's expression was one of profound professional pity. She is not accepting interruptions. Sir. David turned away, his face burning. He walked a block, found a Starbucks, and used the last few coins in his pocket to buy a cheap coffee. He needed an ATM. He found one on Columbus Avenue, inserted his bank card, and typed in his PIN for a cash withdrawal. The screen flickered. Transaction cannot be completed. Insufficient funds. Contact your financial institution. Insufficient funds? He had $4,000 in that account yesterday. He tried a balance inquiry. The screen showed a new, horrifying number, $42.18, a basic checking account with a monthly allowance. Her attorney will provide the details. She hadn't been bluffing. The $5,000 hadn't been transferred yet. He was stranded in the city with $42 and a hangover. Panic, cold and slick, began to rise in his throat. He called his bank's premium service line, the one that used to pick up on the first ring. Thank you for calling First Manhattan Private Client Services. Your estimated wait time is 22 minutes. He stood on the sidewalk, the phone pressed to his ear, feeling the eyes of the city pass him by. A man in a $6,000 suit, with $42 to his name. The queue dragged on. 22 minutes became 30. Finally, a bored-sounding woman came on the line. This is Sheila. How can I help you? Yes, this is David Mitchell. Account ending in 4479. There seems to be a huge error. My checking account has been frozen or drained, and all my credit cards are being declined. I need this fixed immediately. He heard the clack of keys. A long pause. Mr. Mitchell, I'm showing a primary account holder directive on all your associated accounts. A freeze has been placed on all lines of credit and on the discretionary funds in your checking and savings. The primary holder has set up a new, restricted account for you. The first monthly deposit is scheduled for tomorrow. Primary holder? You mean my wife? The account is listed under Audrey A. Mitchell, with you as a secondary authorized user. Yes, sir. The freeze directive came from her. With verification through our legal department, it's all in order. It is not in order. I am a co-owner of that money, according to the account documentation on file. Sir, the funds are titled solely to Audrey A. Mitchell. Your access was at her discretion. That discretion has been revised. I want to speak to a manager. Now, I can put in a request for a call back. Sir, but the directive is legal and binding. There's nothing a manager can do. Is there anything else I can help you with today? He hung up, trembling with rage and a dawning existential terror, solely titled to Audrey A. Mitchell. The words echoed. The apartment, the cars, the investments. He'd signed things over the years. At her gentle insistence. It's just easier for taxes. Darling, the interest rate is better if it's just in my name. Sweetheart, he'd been flattered. Even. It meant she trusted him. It meant they were beyond petty financial squabbles. He'd been an idiot. A handsome, well-dressed idiot. He had one last play. The gallery. His salary was modest, but it was his. Every 2 weeks, a direct deposit hit his personal checking that the one now holding $42. But maybe he could get an advance. He walked the 30 blocks to Chelsea, the coffee sour in his stomach. The gallery, the gilded frame, was a sleek white space he'd once been proud to manage. His assistant, Chloe, a young woman with pink hair and an eternally skeptical expression, looked up from her computer. David, you look rough. Big weekend. You could say that. Is Leo in? In his office. He's been asking for you. A sliver of hope. Maybe Leo had heard about the baptism disaster. Was concerned. David straightened his wrinkled shirt and walked to the back. Leo, the owner, a man in his 60s who wore turtlenecks year-round, was on the phone. He waved David in, finishing his call. No, we cannot go a penny below 90. It's a schnabel. Good. Talk Thursday. He hung up and looked at David, his expression unreadable. David, take a seat. Leo, listen. I'm in a bit of a bind. I need to ask for an advance on my next paycheck. A personal matter. It's... Leo held up a hand. David, I've had 3 calls this morning. From collectors. Friends of your family. I believe. Asking about certain financial irregularities. David's blood ran cold. Irregularities? What are you talking about? They'd heard a disturbing story. That you'd made some grandiose public promises you couldn't possibly keep. That your personal finances are in disarray. That your wife has locked you out of your own accounts. Leo steepled his fingers. This is a business built on perception. David, on trust. Our clients need to trust that the man managing their 6- and 7-figure art purchases is stable, solid, not someone who gets drunk at family functions and passes out bad checks. So to speak, that's not what happened. It's a misunderstanding, a family thing. I don't deal in family things. Leo said coldly, I deal in reputation. And yours, as of this morning, is a liability. The story is that you're not good for your word. In this business, your word is all you have. Leo, please. I've worked here for 8 years. I've brought in major clients. You brought in Audrey Mitchell. Leo corrected softly. And her friends. And their friends. Since your marital situation seems to be in flux, I think it's best for the gallery if we put you on a leave of absence. Paid. For now. Until this blows over. A leave? You're suspending me? I'm protecting my business. And frankly, David, I'm doing you a favor. Go home. Sort out your domestic situation. Come back when you're not front page news in the society gossip blogs. Gossip blogs? David whispered. Leo turned his computer monitor around. There, on a notorious New York society site, was a blurry photo from the Pierre. It showed David, red-faced and declaiming, and a split second later, a frame of Audrey, soaked, holding the wine bottle. The headline read, Baptism by Firewater. Wall Street heiress douses SIL in vintage vino after hubby's big bucks promise goes sour. The byline was Gotham Gabber. David felt the room sway. This is private. Not anymore. Leo stood up. A clear dismissal. The advance is out of the question. Your next check will be deposited as usual. After that, we'll see. Clean this up. David, stumbling out of the gallery. David felt the walls of his life closing in. No home. No money. No job. His phone buzzed again. Not Jessica this time. It was a 212 number he didn't recognize. David Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell. This is Charles Feldman. Of Feldman, Pierce and Strauss. I'm Audrey Mitchell's attorney. I'm calling to inform you that you've been served with a formal notice of separation. The documents have been couriered to your residence. As you may have difficulty accessing the premises, a copy has also been sent to the Hudson Hotel, where we understand you are currently staying. I'd advise you to retain your own counsel. My client is also prepared to offer you a draft of a post-nuptial agreement, should you wish to discuss terms for a potential reconciliation. The terms are non-negotiable. You can reach me at this number. The lawyer hung up. No pleasantries, no sympathy, just facts. David stood on the sidewalk in Chelsea, the sun glaring down on him. The hangover was gone, replaced by a hollow, howling vacuum. He thought of Audrey's face last night, just before she told him to leave. Not angry, not even hurt, empty, null and void. He'd thought she was overreacting. He'd thought she was being cold, controlling, unreasonable about a simple promise to family. He'd called her an orphan. Now, sitting on a park bench with $42, a suspended job, and a lawyer's number burning a hole in his phone, he began, for the very first time, to understand the cost of the life he'd been living, and the price of the promise he'd so casually made. The bill had come due, and Audrey was no longer picking up the tab. David woke to the sound of a vacuum cleaner in the hallway. The thin walls of the Hudson Hotel did little to muffle the industrial hum. For the second morning in a row, the disconnect between expectation and reality was a physical blow. The plush silence of the penthouse, the scent of freshly ground coffee that would already be waiting in the kitchen, gone, replaced by the faint smell of disinfectant and defeat. His phone, plugged into the cheap nightstand lamp, showed 8:17 a.m. It also showed 14 missed calls and 23 unread texts. 3 were from Leo at the gallery, likely formalizing his leave of absence. 5 were from his mother, her messages progressing from concerned sweetie. Call me. We're worried, to plaintive David. Your father is very upset. This is tearing the family apart. The rest were from Jessica. He didn't need to open them to hear her voice, screeching, demanding, venomous. He sat up. The previous days, clothes stiff and sour on his body. The first order of business was getting out of this room. The $5,000 monthly stipend should have hit his new account at midnight. He opened his banking app, logging into the new, humiliatingly bare-bones interface Audrey's banker had texted him the credentials for. Balance. Dollar 5.000.00. A wave of relief, immediately followed by a sharper shame. $5,000. He used to spend that on a dinner without blinking. Now it was his lifeline for a month. Rent, food, everything. He quickly paid the hotel bill online point 2 nights at a discounted rate, still took a $650 bite. The reality was a kick in the teeth. This was his life now. Watching three-digit sums disappear. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since the baptism lunch disaster. He ordered room service, a $28 omelet. Coffee, orange juice. Adding the automatic gratuity and delivery charge felt like a personal failure. As he waited, he tried Audrey's number. It went straight to voicemail. Her cool, professional tone unchanged. "You've reached Audrey Mitchell. Please leave a message." He didn't. His next call was to the only person he thought might listen without judgment. Mark. His brother-in-law was a decent guy, perpetually harried, usually stuck between Jessica's ambitions and his own middling salary. Mark answered on the third ring. His voice hushed. "David. Hey, listen. Now's not a great. Mark, I need to talk. I'm in a hotel. I have no access to any money. Audrey's frozen everything. My cards, the accounts, everything. Alongside, David, Jess is on the warpath. She's been on the phone with your mom all morning, and she tried to go to Saks to deal with the dress. They told her it's a total loss. The stain's set. She's talking about suing Audrey for destruction of property." David let out a bitter laugh that hurt his chest. "Sue Audrey? With what money? With what lawyer? Mark, be serious. I need a place to crash. Just for a few days. Until I sort this out with Audrey." The silence on the other end was heavy. "David, man, you know I can't. Jess would literally set fire to the house. She's not rational right now. She's saying you and Audrey planned this whole thing to humiliate her, to back out of the promise. That's insane, is it?" Mark's voice dropped even lower. "Look, I'm not taking sides, but from where I'm sitting, you stood up in front of 100 people and promised my kid a free ride to Harvard. A day later, you're broke and homeless. It doesn't look good, David. It looks like you were either lying then, or you're completely powerless now. Neither is a great option for me. Trying to calm my wife down. I'm not powerless." David snapped. The lie tasting foul. "It's a temporary misunderstanding. A marital spat. Audrey's just making a point. She made it with a bottle of Margot. Buddy, the point is splattered all over my living room rug. Jessica's been crying for 24 hours straight. Lucas is scared. I've got my own problems." Mark's tone shifted, became almost embarrassed. "And, about that, Jessica told me to ask the advance. For Lucas's future. She said you'd set up a trust or something. I know things are messed up right now, but if there's any way to get the ball rolling, even a small first installment, it would go a long way to calming her down. Show good faith." David closed his eyes. Even Mark, the reasonable one, was now circling, smelling blood in the water. "Mark, there is no trust. There is no advance. The money, it wasn't mine to promise." Another silence, longer this time. When Mark spoke again, the familiar, harried friendliness was gone, replaced by a cold, pragmatic tone David had never heard from him. Whose was it, then? The directness of the question winded him. It's complicated. Marital assets. Right, marital assets. Which means half is yours. So half of whatever that promise was worth is yours to give. That's still, what, close to $1 million? For your only nephew? Mark's voice was a lawyer doing quick, dirty math. "Look, David, I've stayed out of it. The handouts, the loans, the constant comparing. I've taken it because it's easier. But you dangled a life-changing amount of money in front of my wife, in front of me. You made my son's future a party trick. And now you're telling me it was all just hot air? That it was your wife's money all along." And she shut it down. He gave a short, Humorless laugh. Jesus, David, what have you been doing all these years? It's not like that, David whispered, but the conviction was gone. It's exactly like that. Jessica's a lot of things, but she's not stupid. She's been piecing it together since last night. The apartment, the cars, the vacations, the way Audrey never flinched at a bill. You weren't the generous brother. You were the middleman. Mark's voice hardened. Don't call here again until you have something concrete to offer. And David, get a lawyer. You're going to need one. The line went dead. David sat on the edge of the bed, the phone limp in his hand. The omelet arrived. He ate it without tasting it, the expensive eggs like ash in his mouth. An hour later, checked out and standing on 58th Street with a single overnight bag. He need to get more clothes. Another problem. His phone buzzed with a new email. It was from Charles Feldman, Audrey's attorney. The subject line: formal notice of separation proposed, post-nuptial agreement. His thumb trembled as he opened it. The first document was cold, legal boilerplate, but the effect was visceral. The parties shall live separate and apart, shall be barred from entering the other's residence. It made it real. In stark, impersonal Times New Roman, the second document, the proposed postnup, was a masterpiece of humiliation. He scanned the bullet points, each one a slap. Financial transparency. David would grant Audrey and her designated financial agent full, real-time view-only access to all his personal and business accounts, credit reports, and transactions. Mandated budget. David would adhere to a monthly budget set by Audrey, with expenses categorized and capped. Any overage required pre-approval in writing. Family transfer prohibition. David was prohibited from providing cash, gifts, or loans exceeding $500 annually to any member of his immediate family, defined as parents, siblings, and their offspring without Audrey's prior written, notarized consent, lifestyle clawback. Any excessive personal expenditures defined as any single item or experience over $1,000 not pre-approved could be deducted from future allowances or, in the event of separation, considered a debt owed to Audrey. Infidelity clause, a mutual clause, but with a footnote specifying that emotional infidelity or financial deception constituted a breach. Breach of promise. The kicker: any future public or private commitment of marital assets or lifestyle, a term defined broadly enough to include a dinner invitation he couldn't pay for, without her express consent would be considered irreconcilable financial misconduct, triggering the punitive terms of the original prenup, leaving him with virtually nothing. It was a contract for a child, a financially irresponsible, morally suspect child. His face burned with a mixture of rage and a shame so deep it felt like illness. He needed to see her, to make her see reason. This was madness. He hailed a cab, that a luxury he now calculated would cost him $18 with tip and gave the address on Central Park West. Carlos was not at the door. A younger doorman, David didn't recognize, stood sentry. I'm here to see my wife, Audrey Mitchell, in the penthouse. The doorman consulted a clipboard. Name: Sir, David Mitchell. I live here. The man's eyes scanned the list. He shook his head. I'm sorry, sir. You're not on the approved list for today. Mrs. Mitchell is not accepting unscheduled visitors. I'm not a visitor. I'm her husband. David's voice rose, drawing a look from an elderly woman walking her Pomeranian. I have my instructions. Sir, would you like me to call a taxi for you? Fury, hot and blind, took hold. He pushed past the doorman towards the private elevator bank. Audrey, Audrey, he yelled, his voice echoing in the marble lobby. Strong hands grabbed his shoulders. It was Carlos, appearing from the back office. Mr. Mitchell, you can't be here. You need to leave, or I will have to call the police for trespassing. Call them. I dare you. This is my home. Carlos's grip tightened. Not violent, but immovable. The deed, the bills, The ownership paperwork on file with this building all list only Audrey and Mitchell. You are not a tenant of record. Now, you can walk out, or the NYPD can escort you out. Your choice. The fight drained out of him as quickly as it had come. The humiliation was complete. He was a ghost in his own life, erased from the paperwork. He allowed Carlos to steer him, gently but firmly, back to the glittering brass doors and out onto the sidewalk. He walked, aimlessly, for blocks. The city, once a playground that belonged to him, now felt alien and hostile. Every restaurant he passed was a reminder he couldn't afford to eat there. Every store window displayed goods he could no longer buy. He was a man in a bespoke suit, invisible. His phone rang. His mother. He took a deep breath and answered. Mom, David Mitchell. You explain yourself right now. Eleanor Mitchell's voice wasn't tearful now. It was sharp with a steel he rarely heard. I have had your sister sobbing on the phone all morning. She says you've been cut off. She says Audrey has thrown you out. She says you promised the world to that sweet baby and now you're taking it back. What in God's name is going on? Mom, it's complicated. Audrey and I are having a disagreement. She's upset about the promise I made. She's overreacting. A disagreement? David, Jessica showed me the pictures. Audrey looked like a wild animal. And that dress, that beautiful dress, ruined. And now I hear from your father that you're not even allowed in your own home? What kind of wife does that? What kind of woman holds the purse strings so tight she strangles her own family? The familiar script. His mother, the champion of her children, always framing David as the put-upon hero and anyone who crossed him. Teachers, bosses, ex-girlfriends, and now his wife. As the villain. He'd always found it comforting. Now, it felt like a trap. It's not like that. Exactly. The money, a lot of it is hers. Her earnings, her investments. And you're her husband, Eleanor retorted. What's hers is yours. That's what marriage is. Or it's supposed to be. She's treating you like an employee. Worse, like a child. It's emasculating. David, your father is beside himself. David leaned against the cool stone of a building. What do you want me to do? Mom, she's locked me out. She's frozen the accounts. She had her lawyer send me a contract. It's insane. Then you fight. Eleanor's voice was fierce. You're the man of the house. You go to a lawyer, a good one, a shark, and you fight for what's yours. For your dignity. For your family. Jessica is your flesh and blood. That baby is your nephew. Audrey she's just a wife. And from where I'm standing, not a very good one. The words hung in the air. Just a wife. The woman who had built the life they all coveted, whose success they'd happily taken credit for, was now reduced to that. An inconvenience, a roadblock to the Mitchell family's ambitions. I have to go. Mom, he said, his voice flat. David, you listen to me. You stand up to her. Or so help me. You will regret it for the rest of your life. Family is all you have. When the money is gone and the fancy apartment is gone, family is what's left. Don't you forget that. He hung up. The phrase echoed. Family is all you have. But his family, at this moment, felt like a pack of wolves who'd just realized the golden goose had a lock on her nest. And he was the useless gander caught in the middle. He needed cash, real cash. The $4.300 left in his allowance wouldn't get him far. He thought of his watch, the Patek Philippe that Audrey had given him for their 5th anniversary. It was worth over $80.000. A pang of loss and shame hit him, pawning a gift. It was the ultimate indignity, but he needed a retainer for a lawyer. He needed a place to stay that wasn't a hotel, draining $300 a night. He found a high-end pawn shop in the Diamond District. The man behind the counter, a weary-looking expert with a loop permanently attached to his eye, took the watch, examined it, and named a figure, 25,000. It's worth over 80. Not to me. It's not. I'm taking the risk. It's a slow mover. 25. Take it or leave it. Defeated, David took the check. It felt dirty. He rented a furnished studio apartment in a bland, modern building in Murray Hill. The monthly rent was $4.200. He paid the first month and a security deposit. His $5.000 was gone, plus $1.200 of the pawn money. In a single afternoon, the studio was a single room with a kitchenette, a bed that folded into the wall, and a window that looked out at a brick wall. The silence was oppressive. He sat on the thin mattress, the reality of his new life pressing in on him. The separation agreement glowed on his phone screen. The texts from Jessica and his mother piled up. Unread, he thought of Audrey in their pristine, silent penthouse, and for the first time, he tried to see it from her side, not as a punishment, but as a consequence, the inevitable result of a decade of pretending, of letting her play the villain so he could play the hero, of saying yes to his family and letting her be the one to say no. He had offered up her money, her security, her future, as a sacrifice on the altar of his own ego. And when she'd finally stopped it, he'd called her an orphan. A fresh, different kind of nausea washed over him. Not hangover nausea, not fear nausea, the gut-churning sickness of true, undeniable remorse. He'd been so worried about looking powerful in front of his family. He'd never considered how powerless he'd made her look. He'd been so afraid of his family's disapproval. He'd never protected her from their greed. He'd taken the easy path for a decade. And now the build at the real, emotional, financial build that had arrived. And for the first time, David Mitchell, in his $4.200 a month brick-walled box, began to understand that he might not be able to pay it. The message from Eleanor Mitchell arrived not as a request, but as a royal summons, delivered via a stiffly worded email to both David and me. From Eleanor Mitchell, eleanor.mitchell1@gmail.com. To Audrey Mitchell, David Mitchell. Subject: Family meeting. Audrey, David. The events of the past days are unacceptable and have caused tremendous pain to this family. We cannot allow this rift to continue. You will both come to our home in Rye this Saturday at 2 p.m. We will sit down as a family, with no lawyers, and resolve this like civilized people. This is not optional. Love, Mom. I read it in my office at Goldman, between a call with Hong Kong and reviewing a leveraged buyout proposal. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it almost made me smile. No lawyers, civilized people, not optional. The matriarch had spoken, expecting her quarreling children to fall in line. She'd copied David, a clear signal that he was expected to ensure my compliance. David, predictably, texted me within minutes of the email. David, did you get Mom's email? Audrey, I did. David, we have to go. Audrey, I have no such obligation. David, Audrey, please, just go with me. Let's talk to them. Let me try to fix this. I'll make them see reason. I'll get Jessica to apologize. Audrey, an apology from Jessica is worth less than the wine I ruined. The time for a family meeting was before your brother-in-law asked you to embezzle from your marriage. I have nothing to discuss with them. David, if you don't go, they'll think you're afraid. They'll think you're guilty. Please, do it for me. One last time. The one last time was a new gambit. Pathetic, but clever. He knew my history, knew I'd done countless things for him that chipped away at my self-respect. This was a big chip. I let the text hang, unanswered, for an hour. I had no intention of being summoned, but I had every intention of going, on my terms. Audrey, I will be there at 2:05 p.m. I will leave at 2:45 p.m. I will speak when I have something to say. If Jessica or anyone else raises their voice or attempts to throw a beverage, I will leave immediately and file charges for assault. Do you understand? David, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Audrey, Saturday arrived. Cool and crisp. I drove myself to Rye in my own Mercedes, a fact that felt pointed. I wore a simple but severe black Joseph pantsuit. My hair pulled back. No jewelry except for my platinum wedding band. I was not dressing for a family chat. I was dressing for a boardroom coup. The Mitchell house was a large, faux Tudor relic in a good Westchester neighborhood, kept afloat over the years by a combination of Robert Mitchell's dwindling pension and, I suspected, the occasional gift from David that I'd been only vaguely aware of. The lawn was perfectly manicured, a testament to Eleanor's fierce pride. The door was opened by Robert himself, David's father, a tall, faded man who had long ago retreated behind a newspaper and a glass of bourbon. "Audrey," he said, his voice gravelly. He didn't meet my eyes. "Come in." There in the living room. The air in the house was thick with the smell of lemon polish and simmering resentment. I followed him into the formal living room, a space frozen in the 1990s. All floral chintz and heavy drapes. They were all there, arrayed like a tribunal. Eleanor, perched on the edge of her wingback chair, back rigid, lips pressed in a thin line. Jessica, wearing an expression of wounded martyrdom, sat next to Mark, who stared at his hands. David stood by the fireplace, looking like he was awaiting execution. He'd clearly come directly from his new studio. His suit was the same one from the baptism, poorly pressed, and he had the hollow-eyed look of a man not sleeping. "You're late," Eleanor said, not as a greeting, but an indictment. I said I'd be here at 2:05. "It's 2:05, I replied, setting my purse on an empty chair, but not sitting. "You have 40 minutes of my time. Begin." Eleanor blinked, thrown by my tone. This wasn't the usually polite, if distant, daughter-in-law. "Sit down." "Audrey, we're not animals." "I'll stand. Thank you." "The agenda, please." Jessica couldn't contain herself. "The agenda? The agenda is that you're a psycho who assaulted me and is destroying my brother's life. The agenda is that you're a greedy, controlling witch who cares more about money than family." I turned my head slowly to look at her. "Is that all? Or do you have specific, actionable items to discuss?" "I believe the core issues are the fraudulent financial promise David made, and your subsequent assault on me. Would you like to apologize for the latter now? Or shall we proceed to the financial fraud?" Her jaw dropped. "Fraud? How dare you?" "David promised out of the goodness of his heart. David promised funds that were not his to promise," I said, my voice cool. "That is, at best, misrepresentation. At worst, given the sum, fraud. But we can leave the legal definitions aside. The promise is revoked. That matter is closed." Eleanor found her voice. "It is not closed. Young lady, a Mitchell does not go back on his word. David gave his word to his sister, to his nephew, in front of this family. You do not get to ungive it. You are his wife. Your role is to support him, not undermine him." I smiled, a thin, humorless stretch of lips. "My role, Eleanor, is to be his partner, not his accountant, not his keeper, and certainly not the silent funding source for his family's whims. For 10 years, I have supported him, financially, socially, professionally. The result is that he stood in a room and pledged $1.7 million of my capital to solve a problem that isn't mine, for people who have shown me nothing but contempt. So, no, that role is retired." David flinched. "Audrey, that's not fair. Be quiet." "David," Eleanor snapped, not taking her eyes off me. "You've done enough damage by being henpecked. Audrey, we are prepared to be reasonable. The promise was extravagant. Perhaps we can agree on a more modest trust for Lucas. 100,000 to start, and you will, of course, reimburse Jessica for the dress you maliciously destroyed, and you will apologize, publicly, for the scene you caused." I actually laughed, a short, sharp sound that echoed in the stuffy room. "No, no." Eleanor's composure cracked. "No. Who do you think you are? I am the person who signs the checks you've been cashing for a decade, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. And since we're finally having this family discussion, let's talk about what that actually means. I reached into the slim leather portfolio I carried. I pulled out 2 sheets of paper. I handed the first to Eleanor. This is a record of property tax payments for your home in Vero Beach, Florida. The ones you forgot to pay for the years 2023, 2024, and 2025. The ones I paid, totaling $94.2, 17.50, to prevent a tax lien auction. According to New York state law to where I reside and wrote the checks from that gives me a creditor's interest in the property. A lien. Essentially, I can, at any time, file to have that lien enforced, which, in Florida, can lead to a forced sale to satisfy the debt. The blood drained from Eleanor's face. Robert lowered his newspaper, his eyes wide. You paid those? He croaked. I did. You're welcome. I turned to Mark, handing him the second sheet. This is a credit card statement from October of last year. David's American Express. A charge for $12.8, 47.50 at Bergdorf Goodman. The authorized signature on the receipt, provided by the store at my request, is Jessica's. The notes from the sales associate indicate the purchaser, Jessica, said, and I quote, put it on my brother's card. He's treating me. I looked at Jessica. David was in London that day, 6 hours ahead. He was asleep when that purchase was made. He could not have authorized it. That is credit card fraud. Jessica, a felony, punishable by up to a year in prison. The room was so silent I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Jessica had gone chalk white. Mark stared at the paper as if it were a live snake. You kept the receipt? Jessica whispered, her bravado utterly gone. I keep everything, I said, returning the documents to my portfolio. I have the canceled checks for the Florida taxes. I have the sworn affidavit from the sales associate. I have bank records showing the $28,000 loan for your kitchen renovation that was never repaid. I have the emails about the Hamptons rental. I have a decade of financial requests, large and small, all met with my money, and all met with your derision behind my back. I looked at each of them in turn. Eleanor, shrunk in her chair. Robert, stunned. Mark, looking at his wife with dawning horror. Jessica, trembling. David, staring at the floor, his face a mask of shame. So, I continued, my voice like glass. When you talk to me about family, understand what I see. I see a collection of entitled grifters who saw their son and brother marry a wallet with a pulse. I see people who are happy to spend my money, but horrified at the idea of respecting me. You wanted a family meeting? Here it is. You are no longer entitled to a single cent. Not for vacations, not for handbags, not for back taxes, and certainly not for a trust fund. Any further contact regarding money will be considered harassment and referred to my attorney. Any attempt to pressure David will result in these documents. I tapped my portfolio, being sent to the relevant district attorneys and tax authorities. I zipped the portfolio closed. The sound was final. Are there any other actionable items to discuss? Or is the meeting adjourned? Eleanor looked at David, her eyes pleading. David, say something. She can't do this to us. We're your family. David finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, but dry. He looked at his mother, then at Jessica's terrified face, then at me. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then in a voice so quiet it was almost inaudible, he said, "She's right." A collective gasp. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. "David, she's right," he repeated, stronger now. "We took, and we were never grateful. We just expected more. I let it happen. I wanted you to be proud of me. I wanted to be the hero, and I used her to do it." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something besides petulance or fear. I saw a shred of the man I'd once hoped he could be. I'm sorry, Audrey, for all of it. The apology, in this den of snakes, was 10 years too late. It changed nothing, but it clearly changed everything for the Mitchells. Their last hope, their puppet, had cut his own strings. I picked up my purse. My 40 minutes are up. I turned and walked out of the living room, through the foyer, and out the front door. The crisp autumn air had never smelled sweeter. I heard footsteps behind me on the gravel drive. David, Audrey, wait. I didn't stop. I clicked the unlock button on my car. Audrey, please. He caught up to me, his breath fogging in the air. What you said in there, it was brutal, but it was true. I see it now. I see all of it. I was blind, and I was weak, and I am so sorry. I opened the car door. Your epiphany is noted. David, it doesn't change the facts. It doesn't change the 10 years of disrespect. It doesn't change the legal reality. What legal reality? He asked, a desperate hope in his eyes. The post-nup? I'll sign it. I'll sign anything. I'll do anything. Just come home. Give me a chance to be the husband I should have been. I paused, one hand on the car roof. I looked at him, this handsome, broken man in his wrinkled suit, standing in his parents' driveway, begging for a life he'd done nothing to earn and everything to jeopardize. The legal reality. David, I said slowly, is that the post-nup was a test to see if you had any spine left, any self-respect. Signing, it would have been the final proof that you had none, that you were willing to be my financial dependent, my pet, forever, just to get back to the money. His face crumpled. Then, what would he want? I wanted a partner. I said, the truth of it, a clean, sharp pain. I don't have one. I haven't for a long time. The separation notice isn't a negotiating tactic. David, it's a fact. My attorney will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. I'd suggest you use the money from the watch to get a good lawyer. You're going to need one. I saw the shock hit him. A physical blow. He staggered back a step. Divorce? No. Audrey. No, we can fix this. I can change. People don't change. David, I said, sliding into the driver's seat. They just run out of chances. I closed the door, shutting off his choked sob. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw them in the rearview mirror. David, standing alone on the gravel, a forlorn figure, and in the large picture window of the Mitchell living room, the blurred, pale faces of his family, watching their meal, ticket, drive away for good. The tribunal was over. The judge had ruled, and for the first time in a long time, I felt not the cold satisfaction of vengeance, but the quiet, steady certainty of freedom. David's campaign of contrition began the morning after the Rye massacre. As I had privately come to think of it, it was a textbook study in desperate, flailing apology, unfolding in predictable, pathetic stages. Stage 1, the floral ambush, a massive, ostentatious arrangement of white orchids and calla lilies arrived at my office at Goldman Sachs. It was the kind of bouquet one sends to a funeral or to atone for a crime of passion. The card read, in David's familiar, looping script, Audrey, I am so incredibly sorry for everything. You were right. I was wrong. I'm lost without you. Please, can we talk? All my love. David, my assistant, Imogen, a razor-sharp Wharton graduate with zero tolerance for sentimentality, arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Funeral or fuck up? Both, I said, without looking up from a commodities report. Donate them to the reception desk in the lobby, and add David Mitchell's name and office address to the building's blocked delivery list. Done and done. Stage 2, the penitence prose. When the flowers failed to penetrate, he switched to email, long rambling, emotional missives sent to my personal account in the dead of night. Audrey, I can't sleep. I keep replaying it all. The baptism, the things I said, the look on your face when I called you, that word. I hate myself. I was blind. I let them use me to use you. I traded your respect for their approval, and I ended up with neither. I'm in this tiny, empty box of an apartment, and all I can think about is the home we built, the life we had, and how I set a match to it because I was too weak to say no. Please, just give me 5 minutes. I'll get on my knees if that's what it takes. I'll do anything. I deleted it. The next one was longer. Do you remember our first apartment? The walk up in the village with the leaky faucet? We ate ramen for a month so we could buy that terrible print from the street artist because you said it had energy. We were happy then, weren't we? Before the money, before the expectations, before my family realized what a golden goose they'd stumbled into. I miss those people. I want to be that man again. For you, the man who loved you more than he loved anyone's opinion. I can be him. I am him. Under all this crap. Let me prove it. That one. I saved, not out of sentiment, but as evidence of his narrative, that our problems were external, born of money and meddling families, not of a fundamental flaw in his character. It was a plea to return to a simpler time, ignoring the fact that the simpler time was just the prologue before he'd gotten comfortable being bankrolled. Stage 3, the calculated coincidence. This was more creative. Imogen informed me that David had called her directly, bypassing all filters. He was crying, she said, her tone clinically detached. Actual tears. Said it was a matter of life and death that he speak to you for just 2 minutes. Said he was concerned for your well-being. I told him your well-being was peak, and your schedule was impenetrable. He then asked for the name of your gym. I, of course, declined. He'd done his homework, though. He knew my routine. On Wednesday evening, as I was finishing my hour on the treadmill at Equinox on 92nd, my sanctuary of white tiles and clanging weights, I saw him. He was lurking by the smoothie bar, pretending to study a protein powder canister. He'd clearly come straight from work. He still wore his gallery slacks and a wrinkled button-down, but he looked thinner, haunted. The boyish charm had curdled into something desperate and sad. I didn't break my stride. I kept running, my eyes fixed on the news crawl on the screen in front of me. He gathered his courage and approached, standing awkwardly beside the machine. Audrey, please, just 5 minutes. I increased the incline. You're interrupting my heart rate zone. David, this is expensive time. I know. I'm sorry. I had to see you, to talk to you without lawyers and portfolios. His voice was low, pleading. What you said in Rye gutted me, because it was true. Every word. I've been such a coward, such a user. Acknowledgement is the first step. I said, my breath even, my gaze forward. Therapy is the second. You should try it. My attorney can recommend someone within your new budget. He flinched, but persisted. I don't want therapy. I want you. I want to fix us. I'll sign anything. The post-nup, whatever. I'll get a real job. I'll cut them off. Completely. I'll change my number. I'll move us to another city if you want. Just give me a chance to make it right. I finally looked at him. Sweat dripped down my temple, but I felt cold. Do you know why your apology, however eloquent, is worthless? He swallowed. Because it's too late? Because it's entirely self-serving. I said, punching the stop button. The treadmill whirred to a halt. I turned to face him, grabbing my towel. You're not sorry for the 10 years of quiet compromises I made. You're not sorry for the Thanksgiving where Jessica accidentally served turkey broth in the gravy, knowing I was vegetarian, and you laughed it off as a silly mistake. You're not sorry for the time your father asked for a loan to cover his bad golf bets, and you pressured me until I wrote the check just to keep the peace. You're not sorry for the countless times you let them make little digs about my fancy job or my city ways while happily spending the money that job provided. I stepped off the treadmill, standing close to him. He smelled of cheap hotel soap and despair. You're sorry because you're uncomfortable. You're sorry because the money is gone. You're sorry because you finally saw the contempt in your sister's eyes when she realized the bank was closed. You're not mourning me, David. You're mourning the lifestyle. You're a child who's had his favorite toy taken away, and you'll say anything to get it back. Tears welled in his eyes. Genuine tears. This time, that's not true. I love you. You love the idea of me. I corrected, my voice softening not with warmth, but with finality. The powerful, beautiful wife who made you look good and never asked you to be accountable. The tragedy of our marriage isn't that your family hated me. It's that you loved what I could do for you more than you loved me. And the one time I stopped doing for you, that the one time I said no to protect what was mine, you looked at me like I was a stranger. Worse, like I was the enemy. I was wrong. He burst out, his voice cracking. I see that now. What do I have to do? Tell me, do you want me to beg? He dropped to his knees, right there on the gym floor. A few heads turned. I'm begging. Audrey, please, don't throw us away. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I looked down at him, this handsome man on his knees in a public place, performing the ultimate act of surrender, and I felt nothing. No pity, no triumph, just a vast, empty fatigue. Get up, David. You're embarrassing yourself. I don't care. He cried, tears streaming down his face. I don't care about pride. I only care about you, about us. We had something real. Once, before all this, a memory surfaced, sharp and unbidden. Our third anniversary. We'd gone to a small Italian place in the West Village. Jessica had surprised us by showing up with a date, uninvited, insisting on joining the celebration. She'd proceeded to get loudly, obnoxiously drunk, flirting with the waiter, spilling wine, and telling long, embarrassing stories about David's childhood that painted him as a hapless fool. I'd sat through it, my smile fixed. On the way home, I'd been quiet. What's wrong? David had asked, slipping an arm around me. Nothing. It was a nice dinner. Come on. I know you. Jessica was a bit much. Huh, a bit much. An understatement that did violence to the English language. She seems to enjoy being the center of attention. I'd said carefully. He'd laughed, pulling me closer. That's just Jess. She doesn't mean anything by it. She loves you. You know. She's just exuberant. I'd let it go. I'd let it all go. 1,000 tiny cuts, each one explained away, minimized, until I was bleeding out from a million small wounds he refused to see. I pulled myself back to the present, to the man weeping at my feet. What we had, I said quietly, was a partnership where I did all the work and you took all the credit, where I fought all the battles and you made all the excuses, where I built a fortress and you handed the keys to every person who ever asked. That's not something real. That's a hostage situation, and I'm releasing myself. I walked away, toward the locker room. He called after me, his voice raw. Audrey, I'll never stop trying. I love you. His words echoed off the lacquered floors and weight machines. A pathetic coda. I didn't look back. Stage 4. The grand gesture aborted. A few days later, Imogen informed me that David had tried to have a street musician serenade me outside my building with our song, that some forgettable John Mayer ballad from 2009. Carlos, having been given strict instructions, had intercepted the musician with a $50 bill and a stern warning before a single chord was struck. The final stage was the most predictable of all. The legal summons. Charles Feldman called me, his dry tone hinting at amusement. David has retained counsel, a rather energetic fellow from a midtown firm that advertises on bus stops. They've sent a letter. He's willing to sign the postnup with modifications. What modifications? I asked, looking out at the cityscape from my office. He wants the family transfer prohibition clause removed, and he wants the monthly allowance indexed for inflation. I almost laughed, even in abject surrender. He was trying to carve out a loophole for Jessica. My terms are non-negotiable. As previously stated, send back the postnup with a red line showing his requested changes struck through. and attach the first draft of the divorce filing. Remind them that under the prenup, his entitlements diminish the longer he delays settlement. Time is literally money. He won't like it. I'm not in the business of making David Mitchell happy anymore. Charles, send it. That evening, I sat in the stark, beautiful silence of my living room. The divorce papers were a weight in my hands, but not an unwelcome one. They were a tool, a blueprint for dissolution. I signed where Charles had indicated with bright yellow stickers. My signature was firm, unwavering. Then I opened my safe and retrieved another set of documents. The trust fund I had established years ago, a complex web of investments meant to be a safety net, a shared future. David was the secondary beneficiary. I had a meeting with my wealth manager and my attorney in the morning to restructure it entirely, to remove his name, to redirect the funds. I would create a new charitable trust in my parents' names, funding scholarships for orphans and foster children aiming for business degrees. A legacy that meant something, untouched by Mitchell entitlement. My phone buzzed on the glass coffee table. Another email from David. The subject line was simply, "Last try." I opened it. It was shorter than the others. "Audrey, I got the papers. The post-nup with your red lines. The divorce filing. I finally understand. You're not trying to teach me a lesson. You're done. You've been done for a long time. And I was just too selfish and stupid to see it. I won't fight you. I'll sign whatever you want. I don't want a war. I've caused you enough pain. The one thing I ask, the only thing I'll ever ask of you again, I ask that you believe this. I did love you. I just loved the version of me you allowed me to be more. And for that, I will never forgive myself. I'll have my lawyer contact Charles. I won't bother you again. Goodbye, David." I read it twice. It was, perhaps, the first completely honest thing he had ever written to me. There was no manipulation in it, no hidden plea. It was a surrender, an acknowledgement of defeat, not just in the battle, but in the war for my heart. A war he hadn't even known he was losing until the ground gave way beneath him. I felt a pang then, not for the man he was, but for the ghost of the man I'd once hoped he could become. The ghost I'd fallen in love with before the money, before the family, before the slow corrosion of compromise had eaten away at my expectations. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. I placed the phone face down on the table, picked up my pen, and in the quiet, empty splendor of the home I had built alone, I signed the final document that would formally, legally, begin the process of erasing David Mitchell from my future. The click of the pen was the only sound in the room. It was the sound of a door closing, of a balance finally settled. It was the sound of freedom, cold, clear, and absolutely, unequivocally mine. The first shot in Jessica's war wasn't fired at me directly. It was a poison-tipped dart lobbed over the walls and into the public square. Imogen walked into my office on Tuesday morning, her usual unflappable composure tinged with something close to pity. She placed her iPad silently on my desk. The screen displayed a column from Gotham Gabber, the city's most vicious, gleefully unreliable society gossip site. The headline was in their signature bold, blood red font, "Liquid assets." Inside the billion-dollar baptism brawl that's shattering a Wall Street power couple. "I think you should read this," Imogen said quietly. "It's comprehensive." I skimmed the article. It was worse than I'd imagined. Jessica hadn't just gossiped. She'd provided a narrative. I was cast as the unhinged, gold-digging harpy, a ruthless finance shark who lured the handsome, modestly successful David Mitchell with her billions, only to systematically strip him of his masculinity, his family, and his fortune. The baptism was described in lurid detail, painting me as a jealous banshee who attacked a radiant new mother for the crime of accepting her generous brother's support. David was the tragic, emasculated victim, publicly neutered by his heiress wife and left penniless and wandering the streets, while I cackled from her gold-plated penthouse. It quoted a close family friend. Clearly Jessica. Extensively, bemoaning the loss of dear David's generous spirit and my cold, calculating heart. It even mentioned the $80,000 Patek Philippe he'd been forced to pawn to survive. The piece was a masterpiece of defamatory fiction, and it was about to be shared by every bored socialite and jealous rival from the Hamptons to Hedge Fund Hill. My phone began to vibrate, skittering on the glass desk. A number I didn't recognize, then another. My work line lit up. Imogen moved to answer it, but I held up a hand, let it go to voicemail. All of them. I took a deep, measured breath. Anger was a luxury that would cloud my judgment. This required ice. Imogen, get Charles Feldman on the line. Then, call Margot Strickland at the Wall Street Journal. Tell her I'm prepared to move up our interview. Today, if she can do it, her office or mine. I don't care. Charles was apoplectic. I've already read it. It's libel per se. We filed suit against the site and the unnamed source, who we both know is Jessica, at this afternoon. We'll ask for $5 million in damages. It'll scare the hell out of her. No, I said, staring at the skyline. Don't file. Yet, send a cease and desist to the website, and a formal legal letter to Jessica and Mark Harrington at their home address. Detail the specific falsehoods. State that we are preparing a defamation lawsuit with a demand for $5 million in compensatory damages and $5 million in punitive damages. Cite the specific laws. Make it legalese thick enough to choke on. But do not file. Not yet. Audrey. She's assassinating your character. She's giving me a platform. Charles. She's made me a sympathetic figure to anyone with half a brain and a checking account. Now, I'm going to use it. Send the letters. Make them terrifying. Then stand by. Margot Strickland, a veteran finance reporter for the Journal known for her incisive, no-nonsense style, arrived at my office with a single photographer at 4 p.m. I'd had Imogen bring in a fresh suit jacket. I looked like what I was, a successful, composed executive in her element. Audrey, thanks for fitting me in on short notice. Margot said, setting up a small recorder. Given the noisy news cycle today, I imagine you have something to say. I do, I said, offering a small, professional smile, but not about gossip, about something actually important. The financial agency of high net worth women in 2026. The interview was not about the baptism. It was about wealth management, gender dynamics in finance, and the often invisible burden of being the quiet partner who signs the checks. Margot, savvy as ever, steered us right to the edge of the personal. Your personal life has, perhaps unavoidably, become a topic of speculation. A recent item painted a picture of a lopsided financial dynamic in your marriage. Any comment? I leaned back, steepling my fingers. I believe in transparency. Margot, in business and in life. So, I'll say this. For a long time, I subscribed to the outdated notion that in a partnership, especially a romantic one should downplay one's own success to avoid discomfort. That generosity meant silence. I was wrong. Generosity without boundaries is an invitation for entitlement, and silence is often mistaken for consent. I met her gaze. I've learned that the hard way, and I suspect I'm not the only woman in this city, in this industry, who has. Are you referring to the entitlement of family? I'm referring to the entitlement of anyone who feels they have a claim to the fruits of another person's labor, simply by proximity or relation, without respect, partnership, or reciprocity. It's a bad investment, emotionally and financially. And the hard way, I allowed a flicker of something, weariness, not sadness, to cross my face. Let's just say I once believed love was a blank check. I've since learned it needs to be a balanced ledger, with clear terms, signed by both parties. Anything else leads to a painful audit. The article, titled The Ledger of Love, one executive's lesson in financial boundaries, hit the journal's website at 6 a.m. the next morning. It was subtle, brilliant, and devastating. It never mentioned David or Jessica by name, but anyone in our world read between the lines. It reframed the entire gossip column narrative. I wasn't a shrew, I was a cautionary tale, a highly successful woman who'd allowed herself to be used, and was now, wisely, rectifying the situation. The comments from finance professionals, particularly women, were overwhelmingly supportive. The tide of public perception, in the circles that actually mattered, turned in an hour. The fallout was immediate and brutal, just not for me. David called me, his voice shattered. The gallery. Leo. He fired me. Officially. Not a leave. Fired. He said the journal piece, while classy, made it clear I was a financial dependent and a liability. He can't have clients asking if their invoices are going to be paid with my wife's allowance. Before I could respond, another call beeped through. It was a 914 area code. Westchester. Eleanor. I ignored it. David plowed on, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. And my friends, Jeremy, from the golf club, he, uninvited me from the charity tournament, said his wife read the journal and thinks you're a hero, and I'm a leech. They're all dropping me. Audrey, everyone. It's like I have a disease. You have the truth. David, I said, not unkindly, and it's contagious. People afraid of examining their own arrangements are avoiding you so they don't catch it. His sob was a raw, broken thing over the line. She's destroyed me. Jessica has destroyed my life. No, David, you did that. Jessica just lit the match you gave her. I hung up. I had a more important call to make. It was to Mark Harrington's direct line at his marketing firm. He answered on the first ring, his voice tense. Audrey, I got the letter from your lawyer. $5 million? Are you insane? We don't have that. I know you don't. Mark, that's the point. The letter is a preview. If Jessica does not retract her statements to the gossip site in writing, and if she or anyone in your family contacts me, my husband, or attempts to discuss this matter publicly ever again, I will file the suit. The legal fees alone will bankrupt you. A judgment will force you to sell your house. Your credit will be obliterated. You will not be able to get a car loan, let alone a mortgage, for Lucas's hypothetical Harvard dorm. He was silent. I could hear his ragged breathing. She's hysterical. She thinks she's fighting for her family. She's fighting for a payday that never existed. And she's using you and your son as human shields. Think, Mark, really think. Has David ever, in all the years of loans and gifts, actually improved your financial position? Or did it just temporarily fund a lifestyle that kept Jessica pacified until the next demand? The silence was longer this time, heavy with painful realization. It's the latter, he finally whispered, defeat thick in his voice. Then you have a choice. Control your wife, or lose everything you've actually built. I will destroy you to make my point. Mark, believe me. What do you want? He asked, his voice hollow. A family meeting. At my apartment. Tonight at 8 p.m. You, Jessica, David, his parents. This ends tonight. On my terms. Or it ends in civil court with a judgment that follows you forever. Your choice. I didn't wait for his answer. I hung up and texted David the time and place, adding, be there. Do not speak unless I give you leave. The Mitchell family arrived at 8:02, shepherded by a stone-faced Carlos. They looked like survivors of a shipwreck. Robert and Eleanor seemed to have aged a decade, their faces pale and drawn. Mark looked exhausted, a man who'd finally seen the cliff's edge. Jessica's defiance was still there, but it was brittle now, underpinned by a fear she couldn't conceal. She'd seen the lawyer's letter. David stood apart, by the windows, a ghost in his own former home. I didn't offer them a seat. I stood in the center of the living room, a conductor before a terrible orchestra. We're here because Jessica decided to take a private, family conflict public with a series of lies. I began, my voice cool and even. That was a mistake. You now have one opportunity to avoid total financial annihilation. You will listen. You will comply. There will be no discussion. Eleanor opened her mouth, but Robert put a trembling hand on her arm. I held up a small, sleek digital recorder. 10 years ago, my third Thanksgiving with David, you all gathered in the kitchen in Rye after dinner, believing I was upstairs. I was in the pantry, getting more coffee. I heard this. I pressed play. The audio was slightly muffled, but clear. Jessica's voice, young, bright, and dripping with malice. God, could she be more uptight? It's like having a spreadsheet at the dinner table. No, David, we can't afford that. No, David, it's not a prudent investment. I don't know how you stand it, brother. David's voice, laughing weakly. Oh, come on, Jess. She's just careful. It's her job. Eleanor's voice, placating but pointed. It's just, darling, a woman can be too independent. It leaves a man feeling unnecessary. You don't want her to think she doesn't need you. Jessica, again, please. She loves that he needs her. Loves being the one with the wallet. It's pathetic. The poor orphan buying herself a family. And we're the suckers who have to be nice to the bank. A chuckle from Robert. David's faint. Uncomfortable. That's enough. Guys, I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. Suffocating. David was staring at me, his face a mask of horrified disbelief. He had been in the room. He had heard it. He had chuckled. Jessica's hand was over her mouth. You recorded us? You sick bitch. I recorded the truth. I said, placing the recorder down. The truth that, for a decade, you have taken my money and laughed at me behind my back. The truth that David knew it and did nothing to stop it. The truth that you are not a family wronged, but a pack of grifters whose Mark finally wised up. I turned to David. You told me that night they loved me. You told me Jessica was just exuberant. You asked me to be the bigger person. You have asked me to be the bigger person for 10 years. David, while you were the smaller, weaker, cowardly one. Tears streamed down his face. He had no defense. The evidence was in his own voice, his own laugh. I addressed the room. Here are my terms. 1. Jessica will sign a sworn, notarized affidavit retracting every statement made to Gotham Gabber and any other outlet, acknowledging them as fabrications made in anger. She will also sign a binding agreement never to speak of me, David, or our marriage publicly again. Charles will have the documents to you tomorrow. Jessica started to protest, but Mark's hand clamped on her wrist. Hard. You'll sign it. He growled, a fury in his eyes I'd never seen. Or I will serve you with divorce papers myself and use this recording for custody. You have ruined us enough. I continued, unfazed. 2. David and I are divorcing. The settlement will adhere to the prenuptial agreement. He will receive a one-time severance, the amount of which is none of your business. You will offer no opinion on it. You will not contact him for financial assistance, ever. If you do, the defamation suit will be immediately filed against Jessica, and I will pursue it to the fullest extent of the law. Eleanor began to cry softly. Robert stared at the floor. 3. You will all walk out of this apartment and out of my life. You are dead to me. If any of you approach me at an event, on the street, or attempt to contact me in any way, I will consider it harassment and act accordingly. This is not a negotiation. It is your only path to avoiding destitution. I looked at each of them, the crumbled matriarch, the broken patriarch, the furious, trapped brother-in-law, the venomous sister, now realizing the cost of her venom, and the shattered, weeping man who had been my husband. The meeting is adjourned. Carlos will see you out. I turned my back on them and walked to the window, looking out at the endless lights of the city I owned a piece of. I heard the soft shuffle of feet, a choked sob from Eleanor. The click of the door. David was the last to leave. He paused. I could feel him there, a silent plea radiating from his broken form. I didn't turn around. After a minute, I heard the door close softly, definitively. The war was over. I had not just won, I had erased the battlefield. The quiet that settled over the penthouse was no longer empty. It was clean. It was mine. And it was finally, blessedly, peaceful. 3 months to the day after the baptism, I found myself at the New York Public Library, flanked by marble lions, attending a black tie gala for the Mitchell Family Foundation. The irony was not lost on me. The foundation, established by a 19th century steel baron, no relation, was a favorite charity of mine. It funded literacy programs in underserved communities. It was a good cause, and it was a room full of people who mattered for reasons that had nothing to do with Westchester family drama. I wore a simple column of gunmetal gray silk by the row. My only jewelry was a pair of large, flawless diamond studs. I looked like what I was, a wealthy, single woman with better things to do than make a statement. The statement made itself. I was on the arm of James Thorne, the new director of the Museum of Modern Art's Contemporary Wing. He was 45, sharp, with a dry wit and a CV that included a PhD from Yale and a brief, brilliant career as a sculptor before turning to curation. We'd been introduced at an Art Basel event in Miami the month prior. He'd asked an insightful question about the intersection of market forces and artistic intent. I'd bought the de Kooning sketch he'd recommended. It was now hanging in my study. This was our third date, if you could call a charity gala date. It was a public appearance, a quiet, mutual signaling. We were at our table. James charming, a board member with a story about Ellsworth Kelly. When I felt a shift in the air, a familiar tension, I looked up. Across the room, near the bar, stood David. He looked different, not broken, as he had been. Thinner, yes. The boyish softness had been planed away by hardship, leaving sharper, more austere angles. He wore a tuxedo that was clearly rented, the fit not quite perfect. He was with a woman, a pretty, fresh-faced blonde who looked about 25 and was gazing at him with unabashed adoration. A colleague from the temp agency, perhaps, or a waitress from the coffee shop he now managed. According to the discreet report from the private investigator I'd hired, not to track him, but to ensure Jessica didn't try to re-engage him financially. He'd taken a job as an assistant manager at a high-end cafe in Soho. The salary was $52,000 a year. He paid $2,100 a month for a studio in Astoria. He was living, for the first time in his adult life, within his own means. It looked like it was killing him, slowly, but it was building a spine. His eyes met mine. There was no anger there, no plea, just a weary acknowledgement, and a flicker of something that might have been shame. The blonde followed his gaze, her expression turning curious, then slightly awestruck as she recognized me, or at least the aura of the room around me. She whispered something to David. He shook his head, took her elbow, and gently steered her in the opposite direction, disappearing into the crowd. A retreat, a final, quiet concession. An admirer from a past life? James murmured, his eyes following David's exit with mild anthropological interest. A creditor from a closed account. I replied, taking a sip of champagne. Nothing of consequence. James smiled, a quick, understanding twist of his lips. He asked no more. It was one of the many things I appreciated about him. Later, as we waited for our coats, my phone buzzed with an email from Charles Feldman. The subject line, Mitchell divorce. Final judgment of divorce entered. I opened it. The body was brief. Audrey. The judge signed the order an hour ago. The one-time transfer to David's account per the prenup has been executed. The deed to the apartment is solely in your name. The investment accounts have been retitled. It is done. Congratulations. In a manner of speaking. Best. Charles. It is done. 3 words. A decade of my life. Summarized and settled. The financial terms were a mercy he didn't deserve, but that I'd granted anyway. A lump sum of $250,000. A clean break. It was enough for him to start over, modestly. Not enough for Jessica to see him as a target ever again. It was more than the prenup dictated, but less than sentiment might have demanded. It was, I like to think, a truly fair number. I felt a weight lift, a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged I was still carrying, the anchor of other people's expectations, of a broken vow, of a project that had failed. It was gone. I was unencumbered. Good news? James asked, helping me into my coat, his fingers brushing my shoulders. The best, I said, and meant it. A long overdue transaction has finally cleared. The following Saturday, I was in the Hamptons. Not Jessica's mythical Bridgehampton share, but the Georgica colony home of my friend, Eliza Wainwright, a venture capitalist with a razor mind and a penthouse in Tribeca. The gathering was small, elegant. Eliza, her husband, a novelist friend of his, James, and me. We were on the vast deck overlooking the ocean, the late afternoon sun painting the sky in watercolor streaks of orange and purple. So, the infamous ex-husband, Eliza said, passing me a glass of rose. I saw the journal piece. Masterstroke. You turned a trash fire into a branding opportunity. I'm almost jealous. It wasn't a strategy, I said, though of course it had been. It was a correction of the record. And the sister? Eliza pressed, her eyes gleaming. The one with the dress? She signed the affidavit. They're quiet, according to my sources. Her husband has put her on a very strict allowance. They're in marriage counseling. The threat of losing his 401k to my lawsuit proved motivating for him. Eliza laughed. A rich, full-bodied sound. God, I love it. You didn't just win. You reformed them. A public service. James joined us, slipping an arm around my waist. It was a casual, possessive gesture that felt nice. Not necessary, but nice. They're discussing the new Koons installation at the museum, he said, nodding toward the other guests. I've escaped. Much prefer the conversation here. More substance. Less spectacle, said the man who curates spectacles for a living. I teased. Precisely. I know the difference. Later, as James and the novelist debated something obscure, Eliza leaned closer. Seriously, Audrey, are you okay? Really okay? I looked out at the ocean, the endless, rhythmic crash of the waves that spoke of eternity and complete indifference. I thought of the penthouse, silent in mine. I thought of the new trust fund for orphaned business students, the first applications already being reviewed. I thought of the de Kooning sketch, a wild, beautiful energy on my wall. I thought of the final divorce decree, a piece of paper that held no emotional power anymore, only legal finality. I'm better than okay. Eliza, I said, and it was the profound truth. I spent a decade building a life for two, on a foundation that could only support one. It was exhausting. Now, I'm building something for one, and the architecture is so much more sound. She clinked her glass against mine. To sound architecture, the weekend ended. James drove us back to the city in his vintage Jaguar, the top down, the wind whipping our hair. He walked me to my door. Carlos held it open with a respectful nod. I had a wonderful time, James said, his hands in his pockets. I'm flying to Basel next week for the fair. I'd love it if you consider joining me. There's a Richter I think you'd find compelling. Send me the details. I said, I'll have Imogen check my calendar. He smiled, leaned in, and kissed me. It was not a kiss of desperate passion, nor of timid hope. It was a kiss of mutual appreciation, of two adults who enjoyed each other's company and saw intriguing potential. It was nice. When he pulled away, he didn't ask to come up. He simply squeezed my hand. Good night, Audrey. Good night, James. I rode the elevator up alone. The penthouse was exactly as I'd left it. The silence welcomed me. I poured myself a small measure of scotch and walked to the window. The city was a galaxy of humans striving, of triumphs and failures, of deals made and hearts broken. I had lived a dozen lives in its confines. The orphan scholarship student, the ruthless young banker, the besotted wife, the patient benefactor, the betrayed partner, the avenging angel. I was done with those lives. The woman who looked back at me from the dark glass was someone new. Audrey Mitchell, principal, philanthropist, collector, a woman who knew the precise value of everything, including her own peace. My phone, resting on the console, lit up, a calendar alert for tomorrow. 9 o'clock a.m. meeting with Wealth Management Legal. Finalize AM scholarship, trust structure, a new ledger, my own design, no cosigners, no hidden liabilities, just clean, clear lines of purpose. I took a final sip of the scotch, the smoke and peat a comforting burn. Outside, the endless city hummed its relentless, indifferent song. I was no longer just a part of its noise. I was a note in its harmony, distinct, clear, and entirely my own. The story of Audrey and David was over, filed away in a cabinet downtown. The story of Audrey was just beginning, and for the first time in a very long time, I couldn't wait to turn the page.